For 4,000 years, ancient people survived in one of the deadliest places on Earth. No permanent water. Temperature swings from below freezing to 120 degrees. Sheer cliffs where one wrong step means a 1,000-foot fall. Modern survival experts say you'd last maybe a week without gear. They thrived for 4 millennia, built impossible structures on cliff faces, and created a civilization. Then around 1300 AD, they walked away from everything and vanished. Nobody knows why. We're talking about the Ancestral Puebloans. Some people call them Anasazi, but that's actually a Navajo word meaning ancient enemy. So modern descendants prefer Ancestral Puebloans. They didn't just pass through the Grand Canyon. They lived there, full-time, for 160 generations. Think about that timeline. 4,000 years ago was before the pyramids were finished, before Rome existed, before written language in most of the world. These people were building cliff cities in the Grand Canyon while the rest of humanity was just figuring out bronze. And here's what blows my mind. The Grand Canyon isn't just harsh. It's actively trying to kill you. Summer temperatures on the canyon floor hit 120 degrees. Winter nights drop below freezing. There's almost no flat ground. Water sources are rare and seasonal. Falling is a constant threat. Yet somehow, they not only survived but built one of the most impressive civilizations in North America. Let me show you what I mean by impossible. There's a place called Nankoweap Granaries. It's a series of stone storage buildings built into a cliff face 800 feet above the Colorado River. Modern rock climbers look at that wall and need ropes, harnesses, and metal climbing gear just to get close. The Ancestral Puebloans carried building materials up that cliff, constructed multiple stone granaries, and then used them for storage for hundreds of years. With yucca fiber rope and wooden tools. That's it. Archaeologists have tried to figure out how they did it. The handholds are too sparse. The angle too steep. You can't carry enough stone and mortar up that route to build even one small room, let alone multiple structures. Yet there they are, still standing almost 1,000 years later. Some researchers think they used wooden ladders that have since rotted away. Others suggest they built temporary scaffolding from the top down. But nobody has successfully replicated the construction using the tools they had available. The knowledge of how they accessed these locations died with them. And Nankoweap isn't unique. There are dozens of these cliff dwellings scattered across impossible locations throughout the canyon. Granaries on walls modern engineers won't touch. But the construction is just the beginning of the mystery. How did they survive day to day? The Grand Canyon has almost no permanent water sources where they built. Rain is rare and unpredictable. The Colorado River is down at the bottom of the canyon, sometimes more than a mile below where they lived. Yet they developed water collection systems that worked. They built catchment basins that captured rain from rare storms. They created seep springs by understanding the geology well enough to know where water would accumulate underground. They carved channels that directed every drop of moisture to storage tanks carved into solid rock. Modern archaeologists can see what they built. Storage tanks, channels, catchment systems. But the exact techniques? Lost. Attempts to replicate their water collection methods fail because we can't figure out how they made it efficient enough to support populations year-round. Food was another impossibility. You can't farm on a cliff face. Game is scarce. Edible plants are limited. But the math doesn't add up. There shouldn't be enough calories in that environment to support the population levels we know existed. Then there's the temperature problem. Summer on the canyon floor is brutal. Standing in direct sunlight can kill you from heat stroke. But their cliff dwellings stayed cool. They understood thermodynamics well enough to position buildings where natural airflow created cooling effects. Modern HVAC engineers study these structures because the passive cooling is so effective. No electricity. No moving parts, just an understanding of sun angles, wind patterns, and rock thermal mass. Knowledge that took generations to develop and was passed down through oral tradition for thousands of years. The same structures that stayed cool in summer kept them warm in winter. Thermal mass in the rock walls absorbed heat during the day and radiated it back at night. Strategic placement meant cold winds passed over instead of through living spaces. They survived temperature swings of over 100 degrees between summer and winter in stone rooms with no modern insulation. We can measure what they achieved. Comfortable living temperatures year-round. Efficient use of natural resources. Buildings that lasted centuries. But how they calculated sun angles without instruments. How they predicted airflow patterns. how they knew which rock formations would provide the best thermal mass. All of that knowledge vanished when they left. This wasn't just survival. It was civilization. They created art. Intricate pottery with geometric designs. Rock art painted on canyon walls that's still visible today. Petroglyphs carved into stone that tell stories we can't fully translate. Textiles woven from yucca and cotton that show sophisticated understanding of patterns and dyes. They had trade networks spanning hundreds of miles. Archaeologists have found seashells from the Pacific coast, turquoise from New Mexico, macaw feathers from Central America. They weren't isolated. They were connected to a vast trading system across the Southwest. They built ceremonial spaces, kivas, circular underground rooms used for religious ceremonies and community gatherings. Some of these kivas are built into cliffs in locations that seem spiritually significant but practically insane. Rooms carved into overhangs where getting people in and out required climbing skills most modern people don't have. The astronomical knowledge was impressive. Some structures align with solstices and equinoxes. They tracked seasons to know when to plant. They understood lunar cycles. All of this without written records. Everything passed down through oral tradition and practical demonstration. And then they left. Around 1300 AD, after 4,000 years of continuous occupation, the Ancestral Puebloans abandoned the Grand Canyon. Not gradually, suddenly. Within a generation, thousands of people walked away from structures that had been homes for 160 generations. They left behind pottery, tools, and personal items. Storage granaries still had food in them. Buildings were intact. It wasn't destruction or invasion. They just left, packed up and moved east to what's now the Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico and Arizona, where their descendants became the modern Pueblo peoples. Why? That's the question that haunts archaeologists. The most common theory is drought. Tree ring data shows a massive drought hit the Southwest in the late 1200s. Water sources that had supported populations for millennia dried up. Crops failed. Game disappeared. Survival became impossible. But here's the problem with that theory. They'd survived droughts before. 4,000 years in the desert means they'd weathered every climate variation imaginable. They had storage systems that could preserve food for years. They had knowledge of every edible plant and hunting strategy. Why would this drought be different? Some researchers point to social collapse. Maybe the trade networks failed. Maybe political structures broke down. Maybe religious beliefs changed. Population pressure combined with environmental stress could have pushed the society past a breaking point. Others suggest violence. There's some archaeological evidence of conflict in the late period. Burned structures, defensive positions, bodies showing signs of trauma. Maybe warfare made the region too dangerous to inhabit. But whatever the reason, when they left, they took the knowledge with them. Modern Pueblo peoples are their direct descendants. The cultural connection is clear. But the specific techniques for surviving in the Grand Canyon? Gone. Modern Hopi elders tell stories about ancestral migrations. They acknowledge their people once lived in the canyon. But the practical knowledge, the day-to-day survival techniques, the engineering secrets, those weren't passed down. Or if they were, they've been lost in the 700 years since the abandonment. We can study what they left behind. We can measure their buildings, analyze their pottery, excavate their trash piles. We can learn what they ate, what they built, how they lived. But we can't fully replicate it. Modern archaeologists with all our technology can't figure out how to survive in those cliff dwellings the way they did. Attempts have been made. Research teams have tried living in reconstructed cliff dwellings using only ancient technology. They fail. Water collection doesn't work efficiently enough. Temperature control is inadequate. Food preservation fails. Within days or weeks, they give up and admit defeat. The Ancestral Puebloans weren't superhuman. They were people like us. But they had knowledge, developed over thousands of years, passed down through generations, refined through trial and error. Knowledge that was specialized for one specific environment. And when they left that environment, that knowledge became irrelevant. Within a generation or two, it was forgotten. The Grand Canyon became a natural laboratory for human adaptation. Over 4,000 years, people learned to thrive in conditions that should have killed them. They developed engineering without mathematics, architecture without blueprints, survival techniques without written manuals. They proved that human beings can adapt to almost anything if given enough time and motivation. But the cliff dwellings stand empty now. Tourists hike past them, take photos, and marvel at the mystery. Park rangers give talks about the ancient inhabitants. Archaeologists publish papers about construction techniques and water systems and astronomical alignments. And every piece of research ends with the same admission. We don't fully understand how they did it. We know they survived. We see the evidence. We just can't explain all of it. The Grand Canyon keeps their secrets. 4,000 years of accumulated knowledge vanished in a generation. The buildings remain. The mystery endures. And the question that haunts everyone who studies them: what else did they know that we'll never recover? If you want more ancient civilizations that mastered their environment and then disappeared, subscribe to Lost Knowledge Archive. I investigate the techniques our ancestors developed and we've forgotten. Drop a comment. What ancient survival technique do you wish we still had? Thanks for watching.